You're going to need your notes. Good morning, y'all. So go ahead and get that. Get your map and your Bible and your notes. And we finally get into the story, so I'm excited about that. It's going to be not so historical, but we are still going to talk about who people were. Good morning. Good morning, good morning. Okay. While people are logging on, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about somebody that you may come across whenever you're studying and reading, and his name is Josephus. And it might have in your commentary, like Josephus in his writing says, blah, blah, blah. And he was a Jewish historian. He was actually a commander in the Jewish army and got captured and sent to Rome and ended up becoming adopted by a Roman citizen. And so he had dual citizenship. And from there, he started writing about his culture and what was going on at the time. So he is known as the best extra biblical source that we have outside of the Bible, and he lived at around the same time as Jesus. And so from my understanding, I need to go back and check that, but anyway, his writings are found to be extremely accurate, and so that's how we can get extra information about what's going on in the time. And then we're going to talk about how I study for a minute, just so we can kind of be on the same page. Good morning, everybody. Yay. I study by section, so each chapter is divided up into section, and so when I'm writing my notes, I write chapter 2, and then right under that, I write the first title, which is in this case in my Bible, Wise Men Seek a King. So I'm going to write that out, then I read it, and I kind of write a brief summary, and then I go to my commentary and my notes, and I read, and then I write more notes in. I always, next to the title, put where this is happening at. So this morning it's happening in Bethlehem. So if you want to look at your map, and I practice with this, but there's no way for me to zoom in. It's backwards. It's like a mirror, and I'm confused. So if you look at the Dead Sea, see, I can't do it. It's backwards for me. It's like a mirror image. If you look at the Dead Sea at the north end of it and look left, I guess that'd be west, you'll see Bethlehem. It's in the wilderness of Judea, and that is where the story is set. And so you need to find that. You don't have to mark it, but if it makes you happy, you can put Jesus is born here. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to read a little bit, not the whole chapter, but a little bit. And it says, as Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of King Herod, wise men from the east arrived unexpectedly in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was deeply disturbed, and all of Jerusalem with him. So we're going to start out with this gem of a guy, King Herod. King Herod was known as Herod the Great, and he ruled over this territory of Judea whenever you look at the map. He was a descendant of the Edomites, which was descendants of Esau, and they lived in the Edom Mountains, and I think from what I understand, his family was royalty, but it was better for them to give that up and move to Israel because Israel is a major trade route. Like this whole section through here is a major trade route between Egypt and Turkey, and Mesopotamia and all that. So you had tons of people traveling back and forth to do trade. And so it flourished economically. And I think it was better for his family to give up being part of the monarchy or whatever and move here. And they actually became citizens, or they converted to Judaism. And then he was ambitious and wanted so badly to be king. So he even married into the line of the kings, but then remember after Babylon, really nobody ever rose to power because there was always a superpower that ruled over them. So that didn't work out for him, even though he married a woman that was in the line of King David. And so he ended up going down to Rome and rubbing elbows with the right people and was appointed king. So he is not, I think he's part Jewish by this time because his family's moved and there's been some intermarrying, but he is not, definitely not what you would say from the seed of Abraham, from the line of King David, but because of political favors, he is appointed king from Rome. He's hated by the Jewish people. He is known for his genius architecture. If you go through the country, he rebuilt the temple, helped rebuild that, but he had palaces all over the country that were phenomenal. In fact, if you look on your map, it's the only word that's written out in the Mediterranean Sea, Caesarea by the sea. He has a huge palace there, and whenever we went to go see it, like part of its ballroom extended way out into the ocean. There's mosaic tiles still today, huge columns of marble. And whenever we went out, I mean, it's been destroyed because the Romans destroyed it. But on the beach, you just see huge chunks of marble still left to this very day. That's how much marble was there. It was unreal. And I'm thinking that was 2,000 years ago. And you have every tourist that go like me and pick up a piece of marble. And I had 20 pieces in my hand at one time. So I can't imagine just the beauty and the awe of this palace. And he was known for these beautiful, magnificent, very difficult to build palaces all through the land. He was also cruel. This is the Herod that you read already this morning that is just going to kill all the boys in Bethlehem, but in case of one of them being born the Messiah. That was a threat to him. He was appointed king. He had worked very hard to become king. He didn't want the Messiah to come. And it says in your text that in all of Jerusalem, how did it word it? In all of Jerusalem with him was deeply disturbed. They were petrified of him. That's why they were disturbed, because he had even at one point thought that his wife was trying to do something behind his back, and he had her killed and 2 to 3 of their sons killed all in one day, and by a very cruel, sadistic way. So he was just known as a megalomaniac. Try to say that 3 times, it's kind of fun, but extreme narcissist. And so nobody ever knew if you were safe in his hands. In fact, whenever he died, he had 100 Jewish citizens that were well known in the area imprisoned, and he told them to execute them on the day he died because he wanted people to mourn. He knew they wouldn't mourn for him, but they were going to mourn for somebody. So that is King Herod, great guy. So even the whole town was petrified at the thought of a coming Messiah during his reign. The wise men, known as the Magi, were probably from Babylon, and there was more than 3 of them. We don't know how many, but there was more than 3. And they were astronomers and astrologers. They studied the stars. They kind of worshiped the stars. They were pagan. And I just think that this is neat, again, seeing that God is coming for Gentiles and not just the Jewish people. And he spoke to them even in the midst of their pagan worship through what they knew, which was stars. I mean, God is the creator of the universe. He created the stars just because they were confused about what was the truth behind that. He still met with them and spoke to them through this star. And a lot of scholars believe that how they knew the star was going to be associated with a king that they wanted to come worship was because, does anybody know what prophet was in Babylon that spoke a lot about this? I'm going to wait and see. I see all of you that are joined. So does anyone know of a prophet that was in Babylon that told of a coming Messiah? Anyone? Bueller? Okay, so Daniel lived in Babylon, and he talked a lot about this coming Messiah. So many scholars believe that that's how they knew. They saw the star in the sky, and they knew, oh, there was the coming Messiah. Let's go and let's find him. And I love that the text said, and we're going to worship him. So here we see pagans worshiping the one true God. Now, it says that Herod gathered his chief priests and scribes to try to find exactly where the prophecy said that the baby would be born. And they tell him it's Bethlehem because they know. But I find it interesting that they didn't go and look to see. I mean, here's Jewish people that are the leaders of Well, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about exactly who they are. The chief priests are the men in charge of temple worship. You had to be from the tribe of Levi to be a priest, and they were in charge of everything that had to do with the temple and had to do with worship, which is a very big part of everyday life with these people. They were the leading representatives of the nation, and temple discipline was their responsibility. Here you got to remember that there's no separation of church and state. Church was the state. And so these are the leaders of the nation, and they are the people that know the text more than anybody else. They know the prophecies, and their king comes to them and is asking them questions, saying these wise men are here to worship the Messiah. Don't you think that they would just want to go and check it out for themselves? To me, I don't know why they didn't, but whenever you kind of learn more about them later, it's just kind of clear that they don't need a Messiah. They've got everything great. They obey the law. They think that they're perfect. They're important where they live, and they don't really need a Messiah. So they don't go and check it out for themselves. Another group of people that he met with to find this out are the scribes. The scribes were also of high authority. They're kind of like the secretary of the state. So they had job over the nation. Some of the scribes had the job of writing the text. Remember, it was on scrolls back then. And so if they were making a new scroll, it was a very tedious process of how to write the text. It wasn't just one guy in there looking and rewriting it. There were usually 3 people involved, and they were double checking each other's work, and this was very tedious. I wouldn't be assigned that job at all, but I know a few people. Monique Baker would be one. Brittany Guillory, you'd probably be a scribe. People that pay attention to detail. They were from the tribe of Levi as well. And so that's who he went to talk to. So we're going to talk a little bit about this story this morning. So Mary and Joseph lived in a house in Bethlehem. And Jesus was around 2 whenever the wise men finally made it to him. The word in the text is Paidion, and that means child. There's a different word for infant. So we know that he was a child, they think around 2, and there were many magi that came, not just 3, and they brought him gifts, and they worshiped him as the king. Then they're scared of Herod at this time. They know that he's out to kill the king, the king of the universe, and so they fled to Egypt. Joseph in a dream was told to go to Egypt, and so they're back in Egypt. And this is a very parallel story with Moses. You're going to see a lot of how Moses kind of represented or showed a picture of what the coming Messiah was going to be, because there was a crazy king or Pharaoh at the time that was killing all the boys that were his age, and he was saved just like Jesus was. After Herod died, the family was allowed to come back into Israel, but they are going to avoid Judea because Herod has a son, and I think it's Antipas. I showed y'all a chart yesterday, and he had 4 sons named Herod, and they kind of all had different territory. And the guy that took over the Judean mountains, that he was dangerous and crazy like his dad, and so they decided to avoid it this time, and they headed to a region called Galilee. And they're going to live in a little bitty podunk town called Nazareth. Again, this is going to fulfill prophecy, and we see that turn out so beautifully. Galilee is important. We're going to talk about that for a little bit. They had Galilee, if you look on your map, it's up at the top where you see the Sea of Galilee. It's the other body of water, so it's in the north end of your map. And this is going to be the headquarters for Jesus' ministry. We're going to spend a lot of time in Matthew looking at the map around Galilee. But it was important because if we go back to Jerusalem, being next to Bethlehem, that's where temple worship had to happen. And that is where everyone during these holidays and festivals had to go back to celebrate and to buy a sacrificial lamb to offer to the high priest for a cleansing of their sins. All of this happened. There's very conservative priests and scholars and rabbis that lived there at the time. Galilee is a little bit different. To me, it kind of reminds me of a metroplex, a city where you have people from all over the world. Because remember, this is a major trade route, and you have the Decapolis. If you look on your map, right here, the Decapolis is a group of 10 Roman cities that are absolutely gorgeous, and they have everything that you could ever want or dream of there. There's theater, there's shopping, there's places to get massages, there's bathhouses, there's everything that you could ever want. So that is what Galilee looks like. It's just a mixture of a whole bunch of different people living in one area. They do have some of the most educated rabbis known to man in this region. And so this is going to be important because this is where Jesus is going to go to school. This is where he's going to learn Torah. Let's see. Really, the best way to describe this is it's a place where ideologies collide. So you're going to see him run into a lot of Gentiles, a lot of Jews, a lot of different belief systems. And this is where he's going to start. This is where he's going to start his ministry. This is where he's going to go to school. So we're going to pick up next week talking about chapters 3 and 4. So study those. Chapter 4 is probably one of my favorite ones to talk about because that's where he finds his disciples. That's where he calls them. And we're going to go in really deep on what a disciple in that day and time look like. So thank you so much. I had so much fun today. I love your comments. That encourages me so much because honestly, I feel like quitting every day. I feel like a goofball on this. But the fact that y'all are learning and studying and getting into the Word and getting excited about it is going to make me press on. So I love you all and see you on Tuesday.